Welcome to this presentation on ALLPLAN Road. My name is Michel Miani and I work at ALLPLAN Switzerland as a customer consultant, support and course instructor. Additionally, we are available to advise customers on specific questions and help them realize projects like this one. This presentation is about a barrier-free bus stop renovation. This renovation is a part of a canton-wide project that enable barrier-free access. To enable this barrier-free access, new curbs will be installed at the bus stops. At the same time, the road will be renovated. In the initial design, the client and we as planner were able to determine with the help of the 3D model and BIM Plus that the elevation created by the new curbs made the bus stop much too low. Through this realization, we knew that the bus shelter would have to be raised, because on a rainy day, the bus stop would be underwater and the comfort of the guests would not longer be guaranteed. With the help of BIM Plus, the builder was able to tap the heights and take further measurements. Together we are able to discuss the points in a meeting and eliminate errors. Here we can see how the first draft compares to the final project. The specification for the road renovation was clear. We had to keep the elevation of the road as far as possible. We had the road measured by a surveyor and used ALLPLAN Road to create the existing terrain. With the existing terrain, we created the 3D polyline that fit the existing terrain. We calculated the area of the bus slab to such an extent that a deviation was hardly visible. The bus slab must have a slope of 2%. Now we come to the more technical part of this presentation. I was able to take the 3D polyline with the axis takeover function and define the direction of the stationing. In the project manager, I was able to assign a name of this axis so that people could find their way around the manager. In this example, I named the axis as the main axis. Further, I specified the terrain survey to which the axis must adhere. In the parameter for the check, I selected the Swiss standards and other category, such as this project is an urban road, the speed, and which direction the traffic runs. For the access point, I turned them all off so I can enter them manually because this is a more specialized renovation project. The benefit of 3D polyline is that addition to the horizontal geometry, the vertical geometry is also adopted and thus the elevation align with the existing road. After I took over the main axis, I took over every other axis, that is a 3D polyline, step by step. I put the further axis under the category auxiliary axis and I used this axis as boundary or edge axis, with the previously noted advantage of the 3D polylines. I have the axis in X, Y and Z position fittingly accurate. For the designation of the axis, I used 2-digit number and the designation in this project, as in other projects. The number serves to keep the axis in a certain order so that I can assign the axis better later. Of course, there is the function of the axis picker to select the axis, but by the number and designation I can control them. In the Road Project Manager, I can enter the parameters that are necessary for the road creation. In the Area Requirements template, the Calculate Slope option is not necessary for a renovation project as in this project, so this option is turned off. For the entries, maximum area required left and right, I set the value to about 10 meters so that ALLPLAN Road does not have to calculate too much with regard to terrain model. In the cross profile template, I've created two cross profile, one's normal and one's bus stop. The difference is the structure of an additional lane. In the normal cross profile, I have set the main axis to have a minimum width of 0.0001. I set the width with the help of the boundary axis. For the vertical offset, nothing is entered, that is 0. The road layer template I use here is the roadway T4, that is the designation of a standard. The T4 standard includes a surface course with a thickness of 3 cm, a binder course with a thickness of 7 cm, and a base course with a thickness of 7 cm. For the additional lane 1, I've set the width and the vertical offset to 0 because they are also determined by the boundary axis. This additional lane applies only the area above or below to the bus plate. In the area of the bus plate, the cross profile bus stop is used. That has to do with the fact that the structure change. The bus plate is made of concrete. After I set the parameters in the Road Project Manager, I have to insert them to the main axis with the function of the assignment. I go through step by step. With the rear requirement, it is from 0 to the end. The end is at 76.136 meters, so I don't have to do a lot of typing. I make it easy and enter higher value, for example 100, and ALLPLAN Road reset it automatically. In this example, I only have one selection for the area requirement. With the cross profile template, I set the parameters for one side, in this case the left side first. From 0 to the 3D polyline of the bus plate. The first area is with the template normal. In the area of the bus plate, I use the bus stop template, and the last rest again the normal template. I select these 3 inputs and copy them to the right. Since the bus plate on the right side is not the same high, I move the value with the help of the picker. Small tip, with the picker, in order not to shift them twice, you can use the beginning of the middle part. This will move the first part back. To create the road, I have to assign all parameters for the road edge template and substructure templates. I specify one template in each case. After assigning the parameters, I set the width horizontally using the limits function. To do this, I select the main axis, click on the green plus in the palette, then I specify an axis to which the lane must adhere. By means of the picker, I can select the axis. I check the stationing and select the characteristic point. After that, I go through limits for limits. When naming the axis, I decided in advance about which characteristic point it should be at. Another small hint, the additional lane 2 has a width of 41 centimeters. That is the width of the curbs. The curbs need to be modeled at this time, but the Python port is in development. With this Python port you can create any curves you want. Only the 3D polyline that you can be generated from ALLPLAN Road will be used. With the horizontal limits I specified the width. With the limits vertical I indicate on which height the boundary axes have to keep. The 3D polylines have as mentioned an elevation which I will use to enter the vertical heights. The limits vertical works similar to the limits horizontal. That means I select the function limits vertical, enter the main axis in the palette, click on the green plus, and in the mask I indicate to which axis it should orient itself and which characteristic point the elevation should keep. Here too, I go through axis by axis and adjust the height of the axis correctly. If there is no 3D polyline, you can create the height using the vertical geometry. You create a composite element or a 3D polyline, and with a vertical geometry you can create the height position. When creating the limits, I set the street view to 3D polyline, so I avoid a long calculation of the database and the creation of 3D objects. After the limits are finished, I set the street view to 3D view. This way I can better view the result. To get a better view of the result, I now adjust environment and check the whole image. For example, the stop that is too low, and can correct the situation in a further step. So that we can see the difference, I've made a rendering of the existing structure and compare it to the rendering of a renovation. ALLPLAN Road has another function that allows me to create a ride along the axis. I can specify height of the eye points, how many frames per second, and which view the ride will be created. For example, here I used the animation mode. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that I have been helpful in giving you a better impression about ALLPLAN Road with this example, and wish you good luck for the implementation.